in this session, which is organised by Women at Work, so Jen and I co-chair the Women at Work group. We've pulled together a panel of what we think are very inspiring female colleagues from across the business in quite senior positions. And we pulled them together to talk to us about their careers, how they got to where they are, the challenges that they've overcome, where they've seen opportunities and gone for them, and sometimes perhaps not, and how they have managed to carve out such successful careers in still quite a male-dominated field, housing. So the panel consists of Wam Dawson, who's our new executive chair. So welcome, Wam. I think this is your first kind of public event with us, and we're really glad to have you on board.
It is, thank you.
Wam takes over from Sarah Smith, and we're absolutely delighted to have her. The other panel members include Yvette Carter, who's Executive Director of Contract Services. Hi. Jane Campbell, who's our Director of Legal Services. Hi, Jane. Chloe Hutton, Head of Repairs. And Emma Cummings, Head of Places and Community Partnerships. So over to you, Wam, if you'd like to start the introduction.
Oh, thanks, Romy. So this is, I'm just really delighted to be here. So thank you guys for inviting me. So what can I say? So I've been with Southern Housing over a year now. Yesterday was my 1-year anniversary. I mean, where has that time gone? Literally, I feel like I just came in for my interview and then suddenly it's 1 year. So I guess a little bit in terms of my career. So it's been, thank you, Emma. So it's been a mix of deliberate choices and opportunities that sort of have come along the way. You know, I was at uni and I studied biology. And I thought, oh, I don't really want to I can't see myself being stuck in a research lab my entire life. And so I had this opportunity came up to do an internship in HR and training. So I took that, and then I just basically made my way into HR. And I started off as an advisor for a construction company. And then after about 4 years, I moved into the facilities management sector and just kind of worked my way up and then into increasingly senior roles. And then here I am at Southern Housing, leading on this function at the executive level. So I guess a pivotal moment for me was when I was on maternity leave with baby number 2. And I made it sound like as if I've got 10 babies. I've literally only got 2, but yes, it was baby number 2. And the chief HR officer at the time called me up. So I'm on maternity leave, and she says that there's this role. It's a head of role, so it's equivalent to sort of LT level here, partnering with the chief operating officer for a division that had about 12,500 colleagues. So it was big. And as you can imagine, I've been out of work for a few months. I've got baby brain, literally. So I called up my mentor at the time, and unfortunately he passed away earlier this year. But I called him up and I told him about this opportunity, and he just said to me, "What we got to lose?" And I hadn't even thought about it. I was thinking all these negative things of, I'm not going to be able to do this. And he just span it round for me in terms of, well, what we got to lose, this is a positive and a really good opportunity. So off you go. And I remember feeling that real sort of imposter syndrome going through me. But I went for it, and it turned out to be the step that kind of opened so many doors. And then that experience taught me that, you don't have to tick every box before you say yes. And that sometimes others see your potential before you do. And so like many women, I've also come across barriers. I'm a woman, but I'm also Black. So there is an intersectionality in that. And there are times when I was the only woman in the room, or when I noticed that my ideas didn't land until someone else repeated them. And that's really annoying when that happens. And early in my career, I found that really frustrating. But over time, I've learned to be persistent, and just as importantly, to advocate for others so that others don't have to face the same. And I've become, I guess, more intentional about making sure that women's voices are heard and credited in the moment. And in a way, I guess that links into advocacy. So for myself, it's about asking for opportunities and not just waiting to be noticed, being curious, asking those kind of questions that people might think are silly questions. But for me, that's how I learn, that's how I get to know more. And then advocacy for others, it's about mentoring and amplifying voices in meetings and opening doors, where I can for others. And, for myself, I've been privileged enough to have really good mentors and sponsors. And so I know the power of that benefit and wanting to pass that forward. And so that's why I'm enthusiastic about sponsoring the Women at Work network here at Southern Housing. Because for me, these spaces, they matter because they give people encouragement. We've got a really good sense of community, and for me as well, it's about visibility, helping women thrive and progress, and just being able to just support each other. And so I guess sort of looking forward, I can see that we've made progress here in Southern Housing, but I think we can go further by making sure development and progression or career pathways, so internal mobility, that's fair and transparent, and equipping managers to lead inclusively, and by making networks such as these, Women at Work, central to how we shape culture. And for me, it's about turning intent into everyday practice. So I'm proud of this conversation today, and I'm just looking forward to hearing what my other fellow members have got to say.
Thank you so much, Wam. That was, really, really insightful. And we're just so excited to have you as our executive lead.
Thank you.
Who's next? I'm just going down my screen. Yvette, I think you're next.
Brilliant. Thanks, Romy. And good afternoon, everyone. There's many similarities between my story and Wam's story in many ways, but I guess there's hopefully a few other nuggets of wisdom or things you might want to choose to ignore as well in what I have to say. So I'll give you a quick history of what is my name and where do I come from. So I arrived in the UK when I was 24 from South Africa. In South Africa, traditional upbringing. I did have a gap here in a different country, but then I went to university because it was very much the expected thing to do. And I did a combination of a business degree as well as majoring in law. But clearly, I have known Jane Campbell and very quickly decided that it wasn't for me to become a lawyer. So came over to the UK. Why did I come to the UK? It was a man. It's always have to blame a man in my case. And whilst here, I then qualified as an accountant because I was halfway there and I might as well have done the other half because of my degree. And I worked for a logistics company for about 10 years and I absolutely loved it. I did the accountancy, but then I moved into operations. It was a very small company in the UK, but it was part of a big US company. But I loved it. I loved being part of the business development and the whole customer side, etc. But then after 10 years, I pretty much reached the top of the UK ladder as such. And I had a major life event called a divorce, and I needed to earn more money. So that's how I then basically got my next job, which was at Serco, where I worked for my first foray into outsourcing, big outsourcing companies, and worked as an accountant there for a little bit, but then again moved on into business development. So the accountancy part of my career has actually been very small. I've only worked probably 2 years in total as an accountant. The rest of the time was very much because I can never say no. So when someone similar to with Wam, when someone comes to me and say, "Oh, do you fancy doing a bit of this or a bit of that?" I would like, "Oh, that sounds interesting. Yes, why not?" And I guess that's my first tip or my first bit of advice is learn to not say no. Even if you think, "Oh my word, there's no ways I can do this. What do I know?" Just say yes, because very few people is going to ask you to do something if they don't think you should or could do that job. So take opportunities when you can. And then I moved from Serco and I did a bit of other bits, and then I moved to Mears. And then I didn't say no to the recruitment agent was hounding me about this job at Southern Housing Group at the time. And I was like, no, I'm too busy. I don't have time. No, just meet the then CEO, Alan, for a cup of coffee. And I said, okay, fine, whatever. So I met him for a coffee, and I thought, oh, he's got a different take on, because coming from the private sector, the housing association world had an interesting reputation, shall we say. You know, they were seen, and a lot of it is not true. I will hasten to add, being here 6 years now. Anyway, because I didn't say no, I took that opportunity. I then joined Southern Housing Group back then 6 years ago, and then I am where I am today. So my advice, or my nuggets of wisdom here, is take the opportunities. But then I think we all have a real duty to throw the ladder down. Someone once used this analogy, and it's really stuck with me, is some women, as soon as they get to the top, whatever the top is, they very quickly cement over that platform to make sure no one else is there with them. But actually, our job is to make sure that there is no cement platform, and we throw the ladder down and we help other women succeed and bring them up that ladder. So same as Wam, I've had some brilliant mentors or coaches in particular in my life, especially to deal with things like imposter syndrome, that belief that you don't belong. Because just because you say yes to an opportunity, it's the one monkey on the shoulder. The other monkey will be saying, you must be mad, you can't do this. So having people that can really challenge you and say, why do you think that, and help you work through some of those challenges is really useful. But then again, do that to other women. You know, I'm mentoring some people outside of this organisation, and to see them succeed is really so heartwarming to do. It doesn't have to be women, obviously. It could be, you know, any person that comes to you and asks for some support and help is a real privilege to be able to support people. And then the probably the last thought I would want to leave with is try and enjoy what you do, not necessarily in work, but in life as well. Because work is such an important part of your life, but so is the rest. And we have up and downs. There are days that I've gone into Wam's office and said, that's it, I've had enough. I don't want to do this anymore. But then, you know, after a couple of conversations, we actually have a laugh, and we decide, well, actually, what we're doing is really good and we are enjoying it. So enjoy work, try and have some fun, and keep seeking out those opportunities. Me.
Thank you very much. That I think I've definitely fallen into getting bogged down with things. So that, yeah, the advice to try and enjoy, I'm going to take on board, actually. Very timely advice. Thank you. So, and Chloe, are you ready to step in?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you so much for having me here this afternoon. I do feel like it's a great opportunity and nice to be able to share my story. In my previous, life in a different company, I actually had fed back my story quite a few times to different sort of women panels, and it feels a bit overdue. So it's quite nice to have this opportunity. Definitely feel like there's been elements of what Wam and Yvette have said that ring true for myself. But I really did want to use this opportunity to be really open and honest, share some of the maybe not so nice bits as well along the way, because I think there's some learning in that, regardless. My story is quite different, and I think, first of all, just to share with you, I'm 35. When I was growing up, probably around the school age, most of my friendship groups were going to university. That was the thing to do. And I always knew that it wasn't for me. I never had that desire to go to university, and I wasn't particularly academic. I struggled at school. I did well, but I struggled. It felt like hard work to get, an okay grade. So with that, I always had this big desire to sort of get out working and earn some money. And it's fundamental to my story, and it's not to try and feel like a sympathy vote. But I've grown up in social housing, and I have I tick those boxes, unfortunately, from experiences of things that maybe you'd never want to experience, or your children or family to go through, in terms of grown up in an environment of trying to flee domestic abuse. You know, my mum experiencing that, having an alcoholic father that did pass away at a very young age, and things like that. So it was, you know, that picture of poverty, and I think that probably is my underlying desire to have that fire in my belly to work really hard and to try and escape that. And with that, at 14, I got my first job. So I was on £3.25 an hour as a cleaner in a nursing home. And it was far from what I wanted to do, but it was all about, at that point, getting my foot in the door, work experience, learning what it means to actually have the responsibility of a job and keeping to that. So I just continued to progress. I was only doing that on the weekend whilst being at school. And that sort of continued until I'd say I probably got my first job at 19 years old. And at that point, I sort of was able to go into that role because I was pulling on previous experiences and skills that I developed, mainly relating to customer service and complaints. That was my background and how I got my job at the age of 19. And that was when I first started to feel a job of maybe more sort of responsibility. And this is where it sort of, I suppose, have pivotal points for me. So at 19, I got that job. By the time I was 23, so we're talking 3-4 years later, I moved from being customer complaints based to opening up an opportunity to become more like a regional performance coordinator. I was looking at performance and I was looking at compliance. But the way I was able to sort of leapfrog relatively quickly at a young age, I feel, into that role was because when I was in the complaints role, I was identifying areas that were weaknesses for that contractor. So I was looking at dissatisfaction, ways of improving, but not just in a customer service space, actually as a business. So believe it or not, going back then, we had very little data. Systems were pretty basic. And we didn't even have a client report to take to a meeting with the client to report on our KPIs. And it was things like that I was finding opportunities. So it wasn't just about being given opportunities, I was finding them. And I really quickly was trying to position myself with the manager of that contract to almost become their wingwoman. I was their solution. I was the fixer. I was making their problems go away. And I knew that that was sort of a benefit for myself as well as them. So it allowed me to gain lots and lots of skills in that role, and obviously go for that other job as a sort of a regional performance and compliance manager. At that point, again, using that same technique, I was reporting into a director who was having challenges with probably about a dozen branches they were responsible for. There was real inconsistency around performance and compliance, and there was risks there, and some of the teams were not performing very well, you know, with their profits and things like that. And again, it was an opportunity for me to start diving into areas that I knew nothing about. And that's just going back to what Yvette and Wam said, is that I didn't have the skills for that job. I might have had a percentage, but I didn't have everything. But what I did know is that I would have the ability to go and find out. I would find out the answers, I would ask the questions, and somehow I would deliver. So carried on that sort of basis. And as I said, I was becoming that person's go-to support, helper, you know, fixer, whatever you want to call it. And there was an opportunity that come up to that director of potentially winning a new contract. This is over Christmas. A contract has been terminated from this client, and they had no contractor in there providing a service whatsoever. So they approached me and said, look, you know, could you sort out an emergency only service over the Christmas period and sort of step in and help us? With that, obviously, the director, of course, said yes, but had no team or anyone to step in there. And I put myself forward. So as much as there was an opportunity there, I wouldn't say it was given to me, but I had evidenced enough and had shown enough of proof that they all said, actually, you know, we know enough about you, your skills and ability, and where you go about finding solutions. We're going to give you that chance. So for me, it was very much about someone unlocked the door, but I had to push through it. So that opportunity was there, but didn't mean it wasn't going to take a lot of hard work. And I would say you know, it was a lot easier for me then. I was 23. I didn't have a child at that point. You know, I was able to be selfish. And with that, I had a really poor work-life balance, and I would be working on this contract till 7 o'clock at night. My weekends, I would be thinking about work. But I think I was probably overcompensating for not being that person that had qualifications to back me. And, you know, it was a very technical world that I was working in repairs and maintenance and void and planned projects as well. And so I had to fill those gaps really quickly in order to learn on the job. And that was really hard work. And I definitely had some experiences of individuals raising comments around, do you feel that you're up to this? You know, and sort of slightly doubting my ability. Again, I never really had that imposter syndrome. That wasn't something I experienced, but I did experience that it's on me. I've got to prove myself. I've got to do this for myself. I'm deserving of this opportunity, but doesn't mean it's not really hard work. So I've managed to sort of step through my career without the traditional sort of qualifications. And I would say, as a bit of advice, if you do have a mentor or an opportunity at Southern Housing or anywhere to take up the opportunity to do a qualification, I would still suggest that you go and obtain that. Because now, as a head of repairs, I do feel that that's like the last box I need to tick, and hence why I'm actually doing my qualification as we speak now. So it's always sort of, you can only get so far, I feel, in my own experience, of getting to a point of where you can get to without a qualification. But I've managed to get this far, which is obviously I still think is pretty good going. But just going back to that pivotal moment for me, at that point I saw it as an opportunity. I learned everything about how to run a business. I learned commercial elements that I didn't know before. I did have the support of people around me, but it took a lot of hard work. But with it, I was able to come away from it saying we won the permanent contract. We managed to secure that. And it led me on to having so much knowledge about contractors and running a business and the technical elements and what looks like good service from my customer experience background, that I could take that into my role when the opportunity come up at what was Optivo at the time, 6 years ago now. So I've been doing head of repairs for over 6 years. And I would say, before I was doing a lot of advocacy for women, there was huge amounts of opportunities there to speak up, and it was a real drive at the time. Apprenticeships were huge, and that was mainly around for the trades. And we was really keen to get as many women into trade roles. You know, that was a real big push. So obviously not being on that contractor side where apprenticeships have sort of spoken of a little bit more, I haven't had as many opportunities, I feel, to share my voice. And that's because actually I'm managed by a male now, and I manage males, and I have managed males for a long time. Actually around me, you know, other than Yvette, who's the next layer up as such, I don't have many women around me that are, you know, seeking that opportunity. And I hate to say, you see a lot more women at those administrative sort of levels and roles, and that's a real shame. There's so many transferable skills that you can apply, and being able to run a business and knowing what good service looks like and challenging everything, you know, every process, every service delivery method or whatever it is, never accepts that that's the way things are done. Always challenge and look for improvements, and that's where you'll find things you can prove gives you satisfaction and reward. And almost kudos, you know, if you can do that for the company, what's to say that you're not able to do that as a step up? So that would be a little bit of my advice. I have had, just to sort of wrap up because I'm conscious of time, there was probably 3 times that I felt quite pivotal for me in terms of advocacy from other leaders and opportunities as such. I had a director that supported me in applying for awards, and that was really just almost acknowledging what I was doing within my job. I didn't have to do anything more than what I was already doing, but it was just that acknowledgement, and that really helped me. And there was, you know, several awards that I was able to be put forward for. And equally, having a line manager that you can have an open discussion with around constructive feedback and being able to say, you know, please give me that feedback. It's a frustration for me if my line manager doesn't give me feedback, because there's always opportunities to learn. So it doesn't matter if you're an administrator or, you know, Wam as the executive, there's always areas that you can learn and improve on. And everyone manages differently. Everyone has different leadership styles. So being able to have a conversation and say, do you know what, you're really good at this, but maybe you could improve your public speaking, for example. And when you've acknowledged that and sort of have break it down granular, at the time, my leader said, well, actually, what we'll do is we'll put you in a room with other general managers, and we're going to ask you to deliver a 5-minute, you know, speech as such on a subject. And we'll give you feedback on how well you do. And you know, maybe you can say the word less, you know, or take a breather, or, you know, just that general sort of feedback to help you on those areas that maybe you're a bit nervous about, or you feel is a weakness. And all those little things will help you become more confident. And I hate to say it, do the hard stuff that makes you nervous, because once you've done it and you've overcome it, it's so rewarding. And that it's the only way to sort of move forward and go, do you know what, I can do that role, I can do that, I can do that. So yeah, it's been a bit of a hard grind for me. I wouldn't say my career path has been traditional, but it's absolutely been worth it. And there's definitely male or female good line managers and leaders in the business that are willing to help you and progress. And I would say it's probably the most satisfying element of a job, I think, to see someone step up. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Chloe. Thank you. That was really powerful and lots of great advice there. I'm just going to pass over to Jane. I'm just aware that, so it's 1 o'clock now, so we have got a bit of time still. But Jane, have you managed to sort out your sound issue?
I hope so.
Yay, we can hear you. Over to you.
Okay, great. Okay, so just a potted history, I suppose, is the easiest place to start. So most of you in this room, virtual room, probably know, and those of you that don't know, you can hear it. I didn't grow up over here either, like Yvette. So I grew up in Northern Ireland. I qualified as a lawyer in Northern Ireland, and I came here as a newly qualified lawyer to London. So that was probably, if we're thinking about, you know, pivotal sort of moments, I mean, there's a number of them, but that's probably number one, you know, uprooting yourself and going to another sort of big city, and not entirely by choice, I would say. So the legal profession has diversity issues, you know, has nepotism issues, and in the north of Ireland, it's very much closed shop. And if you don't have those family connections within the professions, it's very difficult to secure, you know, a good role and to progress. And those were not routes that were immediately available to me. I had no family connections in the profession. I hadn't done a linear route even to that. I did my law as a conversion course after a politics and philosophy degree. So I did a degree that it was in a subject that interested me, but obviously didn't have a career at the end of it. But I'd always been interested in law. So I secured my training contract. I got qualified in the north of Ireland, but it didn't really look like there was anywhere else to go. So well-worn path for people from the north of Ireland seeking employment in London. Over I came, not really any connections. So off my own sort of efforts, secured a job as a qualified solicitor over here. So my first role was my first experience of social housing. I worked in the beginning in a high street practice. I was a civil litigator with a practice in social housing, acting for tenants, and immigration work, predominantly acting for asylum seekers. I did that for about a year and a half, and it was the social housing element and the complexity of the law for social housing that really interested me. It was a sort of academic challenge. So I stuck with social housing. I did another short stint in local authority, so the same work but from a very different perspective. In the local authority, I was again doing sort of housing management litigation, but predominantly dealing with public law challenges on homelessness applications, so judicial review. As a lawyer, very interesting, up to the Court of Appeal, etc., at a relatively junior stage in my career. And still sticking with social housing, I then moved into private practice, into one of the specialist firms that services our sector, that probably shouldn't remain nameless, but one of the firms that many of you around the room will know. And I spent almost 20 years acting for housing associations. I had at one point up to 200 different housing association clients. And when I was talking to one of our work experience students in the team last week and telling her about my career, I was sort of saying to her, I sometimes sing the worm song, you know, it was big ones, small ones, fat ones, skinny ones, all the, 200 different housing associations, with a breadth in the sector that meant that what they were looking for from you as a lawyer was quite different. So that was a really good grounding. Now, while I was there, I made a shift in my practice area. And again, if I pause for a minute, I'd say that was one of my pivotal moments as well. So I was already a partner. I was a housing litigation specialist, but it was the early 2000s. It was private practice in the city, and I started my family. And in those bad old days, and I very much put it in those terms, in that place and in that time, it was not considered that it was a area that I would be able to manage alongside a family. And so, there's some elements of that are, still, if you like, consistent. As a litigator, the court sets your timeline, that you're not in control of when things happen, and that certainly is more challenging to manage alongside a family. But it would be wrong to suggest it was entirely a reflection of that or my choice that presented an alternative practice area for me. So I moved laterally, and I say it's a pivotal moment because with hindsight I say it was an opportunity, but it wasn't an entirely voluntary one, to be clear about it. So I moved laterally, still within social housing, but I stopped doing the litigation work, the court work, and I moved on to the transactional side. So I was doing development, site acquisitions, and large regeneration schemes. I was doing transactional work for housing associations, and I worked part-time at that point. So again, I look back, I say that's an opportunity that I made a strength, because the experience that I had as a result whenever I moved on from that work, because where I left private practice, I came to what was then Amicus Horizon. And so that was 10 years ago. The existence of in-house legal teams in housing associations was very much a new thing. and when I originally came to Amicus Horizon, it was to look at whether or not the amount that we were spending as a business on lawyers was the best way to do it, the best way to deliver the service. So I looked at where I could, how we could deliver better, and that resulted in the creation of an in-house legal team that I stayed here to lead. And so all of those experiences, I would say they input very much to the team that I lead here. So it's very important to me for us to be a different sort of law firm. We're the in-house law firm, but we look very different to many law firms in private practice. So where Chloe was talking about managers and where people sit across the genders in my team. So 3 of the 7 of my mid-managers, my legal service managers, are women. I have significantly high levels. You know, we're a really diverse team generally across all those intersectionality points. And it's really important that the team, I'm always conscious, I lead a team full of professionals, all of whom could probably earn more money in private practice. So there's got to be a reason to be here. And it's got to be the culture that we have in this organisation and the ability that we have to do differently. And that's about supporting the young lawyers and those with aspirations. So, for example, I mentioned work experience. We offer work experience all the time because, as I said, the legal profession is not an open door for a lot of people. You know, I think if anybody in this room doesn't know that, you know, if you've got friends and family interested in the law and they want to see what it looks like, we host them all the time. We've had about 5 this year already so far. They're at different ages and levels. They come for a week to have a little bit of a look at what we do. When we used to have through social impact resident volunteering, we always interested in peers in the team as well. So the team that I lead here is one that is determined to do differently within a profession and recognise that we are lawyers. This is the legal profession, but it's within social housing and it has our shared values as a guide. And our residents are never far from our minds, being the importance of what we do is often in monetary terms about a more efficient delivery, which allows the business to apply more of its money to what it's really here for, which is making our residents' lives better.
Thank you, Jane. Yes, so true. Yeah, that's why we're here, isn't it, today, to make our residents' lives better. So, but Emma, over to you.
It's been really interesting hearing from all the panellists so far. There's so much that's been said that I feel I can relate to. Lots of amazing, interesting stories. It shows how important representation is and how important it is we do exercises like this. I know within my career, seeing other female colleagues who've got families and have progressed in their career was really important for me to know it's possible. So thank you for sharing those stories and for listening, because it does matter and it does make a difference. So, I'm Emma, Head of Places and Community Partnerships within Social Impact. I've been with Southern Housing for 12 years now, but my journey here started at one of our community hubs in Sittingbourne as a community art worker. Before that, I was a freelance community artist, delivering workshops in schools and for community organisations, while also working in retail to pay the bills. Joining the hub felt like my first real job, one where I could make an impact, and very quickly housing became my home. Over the years, I've been involved in a wide range of community projects and discovered my passion for project management, improving services and supporting people to thrive at work. Although my background is in art, every role I've held has relied on creativity, just applied in different ways. When I left university, I struggled to see myself confined to a studio making art. I wanted to do a job where I could work with people, where I could be of service and have a purpose, and that's what housing has given me. I've been fortunate to work alongside inspiring managers and colleagues who encourage me to grow as a leader. As we've heard from other people today, that's something that is so important, having those inspiring people in your working life. Their support gave me the confidence to apply for my current role while I was on maternity leave. Something that felt like a terrible timing on paper, but too good an opportunity to pass up. I took a chance on myself and I've now been in post for a year. Like many working parents and many of you here today, I juggle a busy role with raising 2 young daughters alongside my husband. And yes, the juggle is very real. I couldn't do it without my supportive family, but also without the backing of Southern Housing. From flexible working to investment in training to coaching that's helped me through the tough moments. I'd be lying if I said it was easy. I still wrestle with parent guilt, imposter syndrome like others have mentioned today, and self-doubt. But I remind myself that I can do this, that I am capable, and most importantly, that I'm showing my daughters what's possible when you work hard, stay resilient and believe in yourself. So my little bit of advice is something I've been thinking about a lot recently. It's about being your authentic self. Sometimes I see other leaders and how they present themselves and I feel I should be speaking like that or leading like that. And as much as it's helpful to take those tips and advice, it's really easy to lose yourself and your own values when you're emulating others. For me, this is a reminder that you're in the role that you're in because of who you are, your unique personality, your behaviours and the way you choose to interact with people. That's what got you here. That's why you were successful in this role. You're enough and people want your skill set. I've certainly benefited from working with colleagues who live and manage authentically. I think, for me, it helps to reduce anxiety about how to be a good leader, which is something that can hold us back from taking those opportunities. So that's a short overview of my journey. Thank you for listening, and I'm really looking forward to hearing some questions and having some further conversation with the panel.